Welcome to the Holly Hall Show here at Spirit Quest Radio.
And when the world that you created has got you feeling tired and jaded, get your spirits elevated, dig down way deep inside. And when you're feeling scorned and hated, underappreciated.
Let's get this party started, and it starts with you. So call in, U.S. and Canada, 201-793-9022. And to get into our studio, the extension is 957-9082. There's local international numbers on the website at spiritquestradio.com. So anywhere you are in the world, call me. Skype in for free. Also, and you can find that button on the player or at spiritquestradio.com. Now let's get started with Life Happens. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this wonderful Sunday evening. It's a beautiful Sunday evening. It's just crisp and cool. It's beautiful to have our windows open here in Toronto, Canada. I am broadcasting live, and you're listening to the Holly Hall Show. Tonight, I have a really special treat for you. I have a wonderful guest. She is a doctor of psychology, but the interesting thing is she blends in Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy all wrapped up in her psychology degree. She's written an amazing book about parenting, and she is in the midst of about to publish another book. We'll talk to her about that in detail. If you want to call in and ask her a question about parenting, about the philosophies behind parenting, or even ask her questions about herself, please do call in at 1-201-793-9022, ID 9579082. So without any further ado, I will introduce to you Dr. Shefali.
Hi, Holly. It's so nice to be here with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You know, we had a little chat this afternoon, and I discussed with you. Most of my listeners already know that I'm not a Buddhist. I never proclaimed to be a Buddhist, but I study it. I study the meditations. I love the philosophy. I have a very scientific mind. So it's probably one of the reasons why I like the philosophy, because it does work so much with the mind-body connection and how our thoughts are so powerful and how it affects our lives and our thought process.
Right.
And I understand that you are born and raised in India.
That's correct. And then I came to study in California, and I completed my master's and then went on to complete my PhD in New York in clinical psychology. But as you mentioned before, my current practice as a psychologist integrates not only Western psychology, but also Eastern philosophy, particularly mindfulness. And, what I try to focus on is helping families and individuals heal themselves from within, using both an awareness of their psyche, but also present moment awareness and mindfulness in the moment.
Now, do you find that your Western clientele, patients, are they accepting of this type of practice of being mindful?
I can't say it's for everybody, but definitely there is such an open receptivity to this kind of work. People, I think, are ready for a different kind of consciousness, a different approach to consciousness. And I see that in my practice. People are readily embracing of new ways to relate to themselves and others. And this approach is really, as you said, so scientifically and practically feasible for everybody. It speaks to how we can be more awakened and aware in our bodies in the present moment. So what better gift can we give ourselves than the gift of appreciating our lives and our beings and surrendering to the present?
Surrendering to the present. Isn't that interesting? Because in Western psychology, and it's kind of traditional, you've seen it on television shows and movies where the psychiatrist sits there with his pondering while he's looking at you and asking you,
Right.
how do you feel about that? And making you go through your entire childhood and your entire past and trying to pinpoint when this all started. And
Right.
I do know that there are some newer age, however you want to call it, psychologists or therapists that don't even want you to go back to the past. They want you to be here and now, and because we can get trapped in the past, especially in Western society.
Right.
We can get so
Well,
trapped in the past.
exactly. And the approach I try to focus on is one that neither speaks of the past or present in dualistic terms or in any sort of aversiveness, because any expression of the self, whether mired in the past or in the present, is just a an expression of the self. So not to get mired in any sort of dualistic hatred or aversion to the past, but definitely to use the present as the vehicle and the key to change. So if my client does wish to go into the past, there is no aversion to that, but the ultimate goal is definitely to use the past as an informant of present moment awareness. So in the end, we do want to come back to the present, and we want to start in the present. So the present moment is used as the conduit for change. And then if the past comes up, or if a focus on the future comes up, there is no aversion or resistance to it. It is used, but always used to bring us back to the present.
Okay, so before I ask the next question, can you let my audience know how they can get a hold of you?
Sure. Well, there are a couple of ways right now, and one of the ways is through my website, and that is www.global, that's GLOBAL, ID, just the letters ID, globalid.com. So www.globalid.com. But another way is through my publisher's website, which is namastepublishing.com. This is a wonderful website with just volumes of fantastic information on conscious living and growing and parenting, all in one place. So I really encourage listeners to go to that website as well, and you can pre-order my next book at that website as well.
They have a lot of amazing authors on there. In fact, many of my hosts have interviewed many of their publishers, and
Yes.
it's not only are the publishers great, but the one-on-one, like the owner of Namaste, the agent of Namaste, and all the authors, you guys are just really good, honest, real people.
Oh,
You
thank
know,
you.
it-
Yes,
it is.
it's a wonderful community that's really committed to helping people transform their lives.
Yeah, and that's very apparent. And I have to brag, being from Canada, that it is a Canadian publishing company. So
Why not? Why not?
Out in Vancouver. So my next question is: do you teach your patients or your clients to meditate, to be in the moment, present moment meditation, emptying the mind?
Right. If they're ready and open to that kind of technique, then yes, I do. However, even if someone is not, absolutely ready to close their eyes and turn inward, I still do introduce present moment awareness simply in the way we talk, in the way we use the past, in the way we use hopes for the future. All of it, as I mentioned before, is always focused on bringing us back to the present. So even in dialogue, if the client does wish to go to the past or does wish to focus on the future, all of that is always seen to be relevant only as much as it informs the present. So in that way, I help clients begin to train themselves and train their thought processes to begin to gear themselves to the present moment. And it's hard for people. We have been trained or conditioned by society to live in the past or live in the future. We as a society are not trained to be here now. And as parents, we seem to forget how to engage with our children with a complete and absolute engagement in their beings in the present moment. And so it's wonderful training for everybody to become more alive and awakened to their own lives.
And that brings us to your book, the first book. When did you write and publish your first book? What's the name of your first book? Let's share that with the audience first of all.
Sure. The first book is called It's a Mom, What You Should Know About the Early Years of Motherhood. You know how when you're in the hospital and everyone brings either it's a boy balloon or it's a girl balloon.
Yes.
And I remember sitting there and going, well, what about it's a mom balloon? Where's my balloon?
I got a story for you. Go ahead. That's great. Go ahead.
So this book was really written to acknowledge the unacknowledged aspects of first-time motherhood and to really validate all that the mother goes through. There's so many books out there that speak to the beauteous aspects of motherhood, and all of that is so true. But then we also need books out there that also acknowledge the shadow aspects of motherhood, particularly the deep and transformative effect motherhood has on a woman, especially the first time around. And this book really speaks to that particular journey. And it was inspired again by my own foray into motherhood and how I felt that there weren't enough voices out there that spoke to all that's not often spoken about, at parties or with our relatives. I wanted a book out there that gave voice to the darkest fears mothers have and the unacknowledged aspects of their own psyche that they didn't wish anyone to know. I wanted mothers out there to feel that there was someone else who had been through those experiences and was there to say that this is normal and this is okay.
So what is an example of one of the darkest fears of motherhood?
Well, I think one of the darkest fears, and I've heard quite a few women speak to this, is just when you reach that point when you just feel you can't give anymore, and you can't do anymore, and there's absolutely no one you feel that you can trust to speak that to. When you just feel helpless and that you just can't, there's nothing in you to give anymore. And mothers usually reach that place because they've allowed themselves to go for so many months unacknowledging that they do have limitations and they themselves need to be filled as well. And especially as first time mothers, we feel like we are just elastic beyond belief and we can keep giving. But then there does come a point when we need to say, no, I cannot give to even my baby anymore until I first give to myself. But that is often seen as blasphemous, at least to the self. Our super egos are so on overdrive. We must be the biggest, the best, the most perfect, the most giving mothers, that we don't acknowledge to ourselves that there's a limit to that, and that's okay and that's healthy. And in fact, perhaps the only way that we can then keep giving to our child.
So I have a question with you, since you have an experience with Western and Eastern culture. In Western society, where divorce is quite prevalent, there are so many mothers raising children on their own. Yet, when you look in history, at least in Western history, even though there were parents that were still together, a lot of mothers still raised their children on their own because the father or the husband was away working to provide an income for the home. So sometimes I think it might be a bit of a myth, but still there is that support that there's somebody there and there's somebody that can provide you, or at least help provide you with putting food on the table and whatnot. In your culture, are fathers very present with the upbringing of children?
Well, now you're going to get me into trouble with all the men I know from my culture. But I think I've given away my the likelihood of my answer, at least, which is to say not necessarily. And part of that is just a cultural conditioning. Women stay at home, and I'm making broad strokes. So if anyone has 10 exceptions to this, I completely understand. But just
there's
broadly
many cultures
speaking,
that are like that.
Right. Just broadly speaking, the men leave the house and they work. But growing number of Indian women are leaving the house and working as well. What is unique perhaps about cultures like India is that collective support system
That's my next
definitely
question.
there.
We don't have that here either.
Right.
So I was
Right.
going to ask you if at least the women are work together and help each other and support each other emotionally and physically. And
Well, I don't know about emotionally. I think, also in those kind of cultures, the expectation on women is unbearable at times. And women often put the greatest expectation on each other and the greatest pressure on each other. But
well
what
said.
perhaps
Mm-hmm.
that woman may have, and again, this is very broadly speaking, is that just that larger kinship, that support circle, the mother-in-law, the sister-in-law, or the sister, or the mother. I mean, people kind of stay more connected there. So you have
Family.
more options for support. Yeah, that is definitely vibrant and stronger. But again, there are many exceptions to that rule. But and also the dark side of that is what I just alluded to, that inordinate pressure we women put on each other. I stayed at home and I breastfed my child for 5 years. So why can't, or not 5 years, 2 years. So why can't you? And there's a
Yeah.
lot of judgment that unspokenly gets passed around simply because women have kind of exalted their role of motherhood to the extreme often,
Mm-hmm.
So then for a young working mother, um, for her to negotiate, say, the pressures of a work life as well as motherhood, then becomes more pressureful because of all those expectations.
And then that is, I'm definitely 100% a Westerner, but I was raised with a lot of Italian families, raised in the Catholic religion, a very strong Italian French community, and the Italian family is very much like that too. They very support each other. They have your back, but behind closed doors, one's nattering about how the other one shouldn't be doing this and should be doing that, and everything else.
That's just the shadow side of every
Yeah.
close relationship, right? There's that inordinate pressure that comes from close scrutiny, which is you can't escape from. So they both come together. You get the intrusion, but then you get the support.
Yeah, that's very well said. We do have somebody on the switchboard. I just want to remind them, if they press *9, they can raise their hand if they would like to have a conversation with Dr. Shefali or ask her a question. The next question I have is, what makes this book on parenting different than any other book?
Sure. So the second book that is about to be released with Namaste is called The Conscious Parent, Transforming Ourselves, Empowering Our Children. And this book, I believe, may be different from others because unlike typical books out there that focus on the emotional and spiritual well-being of children, this book really focuses on the raising of the parent, if you will, on the emotional and spiritual milestones that the parent needs to go through in order to best become the parent of the child in front of them. And it really speaks to the spiritual development of the parent and how the parent can elevate their consciousness through the parenting journey. So the child then begins to be seen as a spiritual teacher of many lessons that the parent needs to learn and inculcate in order to become a better human being.
And isn't that so true? Because my daughter is just turned 11, and she is my greatest teacher. And I think that is, in most cases, like, of course, we do want to feel that we can nurture our child and help support our child and raise our child and teach our child things. But I think the greatest opportunity is to see what sides of you are being exposed because you're a mother that you've never witnessed about yourself before you were a mother.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And people always say, I've got so many demons in my closet and I don't think I can become a parent. And I always say, even if you had no demons, you don't even know what's about to pop out till you become
have no
a parent.
clue.
So,
No.
better to embrace them and be aware of them than never to be aware of them. So our children bestow us this inestimable gift by truly being the mirrors of our shadow sides, our silent sides, and sides that we have not yet discovered, both good, bad, and the ugly. So this is how our children can, usher us to a higher consciousness if we allow them to, if we are open to them doing so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask my producer to take this caller and see if she or he has any questions, because I can see that she or he has Skyped in, and sometimes pressing *9 is not always that easy. So as soon as he does that, he'll let me know in the chat room here.
Sure.
Okay, so I wanted to share quickly a story. And listener, if you do pop in, just say hello, when we'll talk to you. Okay, hello. You're listening to the Holly Hall Show. Do you have a question for Dr. Shefali? Okay. No. Okay, so we'll unmute them. Sometimes people Skype in just to listen because they're calling in on their iPhone or their telephone or whatnot. So that's great. The story I had to share with you was, I wasn't a mother until I was 36, but I had a very close friend in my late 20s that became a mother. And when she first had her first child, I went into the hospital, and of course I gave the little basket for the baby with all the little baby toys and baby stuff in it. But I also handmade her. I'm a very creative, crafty person, so I handmade her a T-shirt that I knew it was painted, and I knew it had all the stuff on it that she wanted. So I put that in a little bag and gave that to her, and I said, "This is a gift for you." And she opened it up, and she saw the T-shirt, and she saw it was just for her, and she started crying her eyes out. And of course, we're a little bit emotional after we have a child,
Right.
with the hormones going, and she just started blurting out, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you got me something. Nobody gives me anything. Everybody gives the baby something. Everybody wants to know how the baby's doing." She just went on and on. Like, it was a great release for her, right? And I was so happy because that was my intention. My intention was to acknowledge her as a mom, was to acknowledge her accomplishment, because I'd seen her through her 9 months of pregnancy. I known what she went through trying to get pregnant, and this was a big thing for her. It was about her as well.
Absolutely. And the more we women can support each other with the understanding that we know how hard it is for us to, not only house this being within our bodies for 9 months and watch our bodies become unrecognizable to us, but also what a toll and effect it has on our psyches. The biological connection we share with our children can simply not be compared. And the effect it has then on our beings and every intrinsic part of ourselves is just inestimable. And we need to acknowledge that for each other and support each other, validate each other's experiences, no matter how different they may be from our own. There is no perfect way to mother or parent, and there is no ideal out there. And the less we judge each other, then we can all truly come together and commune around this absolutely marvelous journey for all its shadow aspects and its light.
Right. Can you give me an example of why you feel that women, I have my own concept of why women judge each other.
Do you want to share yours first?
Okay.
Since you have it readily available, and then I'll share it.
I do. I think it's a competition to feed our egos, to help us feel better about what we feel we're lacking.
Right, exactly. I agree. I was going to say because we're just insecure.
Yeah.
Because when we are insecure, that is when the voice of judgment rises. So, and we wish to compare or equalize the playing field.
Yeah.
And when we feel lesser than, then we need to feel greater than so that we can match the other.
Exactly.
And I agree with you. But it's we women who torment each other. The men are not doing. I don't believe the men are doing this to us.
No.
It's like how when you get ready for a party, you're really dressing for the women.
Mm-hmm.
It's we who put the most pressure on each other, trying to outdo each other. But yet, I will also say that we women have the potential to be each other's greatest supporters. I mean, the greatest support in my life comes from the women in my life, and so we can be both. We have the potential to be both. So the first book I wrote was just to remind us women to harness the power we have for the collective good, and to remember that judgments hurt us all, and we all drown with every judgment or stone cast on another.
Right. Right. And I think this goes down in history. It's probably always been a type of competition, and it does have to do with the men in our lives. But now, or even within our family members, but now in the last 40 years with the media, that's compounded it.
Absolutely, and especially in something like parenthood or motherhood, I don't think we can take anything more personally than we do our role as mothers.
That's right.
And I'm hoping that my second book may help us mothers realize that, it is our egos that are getting that we're getting attached to.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, and that we can detach from that again to ease into the role with greater equanimity.
That was the other thing that I was going to mention. I'll let you take a sip of water because I know you're suffering from the same chest cold and head cold that I am. Deepak Chopra, in his book, it's not the art of living. I'm not thinking of it right now. It's a beautiful white book. What's that?
The seven laws of
yes,
parenthood or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's this. Yeah. And also the 4 Agreements, which I like, which is not Deepak Chopra, but the 4 Agreements. But there's a whole chapter on the art of attachment or detachment.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that he mentions that he says is the most difficult, even a true Buddhist has a difficult time of detaching themselves from their own child, which means you don't have an attachment to your child living or not living, what your child does, what your child doesn't do, how they end up, how they don't end up. There's no attachment to it. And of course, any parent would go, oh, of course I care. There's a difference between caring and attachment.
Exactly. And I'm hoping my book can illuminate the difference a little bit as well. And whenever we say the word detached to parents especially, they take it to mean that, what do you mean? How can I not care? How can I not love? And like you said, there's a big difference between caring and loving and attachment. And what I could say to that difference is that attachment of the ego is for our need, and care and love is to serve the needs of our child. And that's the difference. And most of the time, we as parents unconsciously are serving our own needs and fulfilling our own needs rather than truly meeting the needs of our children. And if we can remember in the moment to ask the question, am I reacting right now to serve my own ego, to quell my own anxieties, to soothe my own frustrations, or to feed my own ego? Or am I doing this truly in the service of the child in front of me? And then choose to respond, even if it means to say something unbecoming or raise one's voice, after one has, done the check-in and become mindful. Then one is free to respond, and then we will find our children will respond back to us, because then it's authentically in their service and not just to feed our own selves. And when we do feed our own selves, our children do not respond, and then a rift appears between parent and child. The parent is confused, not knowing why, and only later upon discovering that they were simply nurturing their own needs and nurturing their own whims and fancies rather than truly, authentically responding to their children. Our children will always tell us when we are responding to our ego or whether we're responding to them. All we need to do is listen to them.
I have a question that I hope you can answer after the next station identification break, and I'll ask you it right now, and if you can answer it when we get back.
Sure.
Is there a formula or a question and answer that we can use for ourselves to determine whether we are basing a decision, a parenting decision based on our ego or based on the needs of our child? If you can answer that after this station identification break.
I will try.
Not near your computer? Then why don't you take me with you on your iPhone? Yes, you can get SpiritQuestRadio.com at iTunes. Just look up radio and scroll down to Spirit Quest Radio. Why don't you take me with you on your iPod? You can go to the archives and download any MP3 that you like in the archives and hosts area. Take me with you everywhere you go. Astrology. Astrology by Holly Hall. Astrology is a mirror of your soul, a reflection of who you are, who you were, who you can become. Make it happen. Have an astrology reading done. Change your destiny. It will change your life. It'll give you a different and more positive perspective of what life has to offer you. If you would like an astrology reading, simply email me at hollyhall@spiritquestradio.com. I would love to speak with you about you. Email me now. Come on, you can do it. Give me a call at 201-793-9022. And the extension to our studio is 957-9082. There are international phone numbers on our website at spiritquestradio.com. And you can also Skype in for free. Call in. I want to hear from you now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Holly Hall Show. I have a very special guest today, Dr. Shefali. She has written one book. She's working on a second book about consciousness and parenting. She is a doctor, a psychologist. She has a Western and Eastern philosophy and training in psychology, and she blends the two together, which is fascinating and very unique. The interesting thing is that I have always studied Buddhism, but I've always been fascinated with authors that are in the Western society, and they blend the two together. Most of my listeners know that I'm an astrologer, and I do the same thing. I blend in Western and Eastern astrology. So that's quite interesting. But before we left for our station ID, I asked Dr. Shefali a question, and what's your take on that?
Well, so you were asking if there's a way parents can do a check-in or have a toolbox that would allow them to know if they were operating from their own ego state or truly responding to the needs of their child, correct?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, so there are no easy answers or quick and easy, tools that I can give. However, to break down a very complex lifelong quest for self-awareness into a few easy steps, I will say that to begin this path, parents need to first become open to the possibility that their ego will always, to some degree, be in operation when they're interacting with their children. Mm-hmm. This awareness in itself, a true awareness, not an intellectual understanding, but an experiential awareness of one's ego in operation, this awareness will in itself bring about a shift in how they relate with their children. Because when we are aware, moment to moment, that the ego is going to rise up at any given point, or the ego is already in operation, then we will pay attention and be mindful and discover ways to quell the ego and step aside from the ego, detach from the ego in the moment, and it's hard to say how one does that. Awareness does that. Awareness burns through ignorance and creates the possibility for change. So detaching from the ego, watching it as it rises in the body, and then stepping aside from it to then tune in to where one's child is. Truly listen, awake, open-eyed, open ears, open heart, and truly engage with one's child. This is what it means to engage in presence moment and presence-filled attentiveness, to be truly receptive to one's child. But again, awareness of one's own ego. And this means that parents need to do the work. And that's why I started off this answer saying there are no easy, quick answers to give parents, except that they have to begin walking the path of self-awareness. They have to take moment by moment to look inside themselves and discover where their ego lies.
Often what I find, and I discovered this when I do a lot of astrology readings, and a lot of parents ask me to do their child's chart, their mother's chart, their parent's chart, and there's always a really key connection between the two. And what I have found, even with my own child, is first of all, I think we should let go of expecting ourselves to be perfect. And second of all, I find that, for instance, in my situation with my daughter, she's a very impatient person, extremely impatient, and very go, nonstop. Her mind's all over the place. And it drives me crazy. But I am exactly the same way.
Right.
I'm exactly like that. So instead of me fighting with her, because what she does is when she's that way, it aggravates my characteristic. It ignites the characteristic side of me that I don't want ignited. So, and I have found myself bickering with her about it, but I'm also very honest with her. Even if it's 2 hours later or 24 hours later, if I realize that I am exactly the same, I will go back to her and I'll talk to her about it. I go, you know what? Mommy's the same way. Let's work on this together. Let's, and then kids are not, they're not stupid. They're very intelligent. They sponge in. They're very intuitive. And I think they're okay if you say, you know what? Mommy has a short temper too, or mommy's impatient too, or mommy, just like you. They like that.
Right. But see how open and aware you were to see the reflection of yourself in your child's behavior. Now, another parent who wasn't so open to this sort of self-discovery would simply medicate the child or take the child to a psychiatrist or therapist and look to fix the child.
Yeah.
So when we do that, we escape from the wondrous opportunity to change ourselves or to become better, not necessarily do away or deny who we intrinsically are, but to transcend and transform. So your path was to look at her as a reflection of the self and go, hey, the parts in her that I'm resisting may be the very parts that are within me that I simply do not wish to acknowledge. And the minute we can begin doing that, asking, why am I resisting my child right now? Why am I not able to flow with her energy? Is it because she's truly being defiant and needs to be corrected? Or is it because my child is bringing something up within me that I do not wish to see about myself? And more likely than not, it's the second, it's the latter.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's when we resist our children the most, because they are so someone we deem them not to be, or we wish they were not, or we don't want them to be because they shouldn't be something. And most likely they're just mirroring those shadow aspects of ourselves that we do not want to see about ourselves.
That's interesting, because what just came to mind right now is that they say that the first 5 years of a child's life is very formative. Anything after, and you can make a difference, you can connect, you can do whatever you can in the first 5 years. After that, the child is extremely influenced by outside influences, by your reactions and whatnot. I'm wondering if there is the first 5 years, it's our opportunity. I'm getting really deep here, but or maybe way out there. But the first 5 years is our opportunity to learn. It's like a school. It's a 5-year schooling of us to be able to connect to our children.
Oh my goodness, I definitely. And infancy affords us the greatest opportunity for spiritual transformation. I mean, talk about learning how to be in the body, how to be non-verbally connected to oneself. Talk about present moment connection and relatedness. All of this happens to the extreme in infancy. So our infants, as seemingly, the most powerless, seemingly, are actually the most potent spiritual awakeners that we can have, because they force us to be in the moment, connect to them, be attuned silently in a state of stillness and open spaciousness like no other can do to us.
Right.
So I often encourage parents who have infants to use that time of seeming vegetation to really dip into the deeper self and rise up to a higher consciousness, because our infants really will allow us. They are the greatest portals for our increased consciousness.
I love that word, portal. That's perfect. That's perfect. in your work, I'm hoping that our listeners, this is archived in the archives as of tomorrow. Of course, today is September 12th, but this will be rebroadcasted for several weeks. And anyone who's listening at this point, I want everyone to acknowledge how important Dr. Shefali's work is. Your book, especially with conscious parenting, is so important because children, and we've said this in the past, it's very cliche, children are our future, but I think it's more so now because we're, as a collective, as a society, we're more conscious, right? We're so much more not into, grow the crops on the farm and make sure the houses are being built and you pass on your homes to your, we're more in a spiritual realm, and we're so much more separated because of divorce rate and people moving to other different countries and being raised far from their parents or leaving their parents at a young age, 18, 19 years old. You're leaving your family from India or China and you're moving to wherever. And I think it's really important that the children that we raise have this consciousness that they are able to make a huge difference. And we're more aware. We have more time to do that. We really do. We're not raising 10, 12 children. You can say, I'm working, 8 hours a day, and I have to keep in contact with my friends. I got movies to go to and clothes to buy. But we really have a lot more time to individually work on our 1 or 2 children than it was 100 years ago when you had to focus on 10, 12 children.
Right, and I agree with you that it's time for us to take this endeavor very, very seriously. And it's not that we have not taken parenting seriously, but perhaps now we need to take it seriously in terms of our own spiritual evolution and really allow this journey to usher us into a greater attunement with our own being so that then we can rise up and be the parents we were meant to be for our children. It's time for us to become extraordinary human beings and not just focus on our children being extraordinary. We need to become extraordinary for the greater good of our children.
So who would you say is the greater teacher, Dr. Shefali? Would you say it's the parent, and I know I'm putting you on a spot, is the parent the better teacher for the child, or the child a better teacher for the parent?
We teach each other in different aspects. Of course, the child looks to the parent for everything, right? We are the child's lifeblood. We are the backbone until the child can function on its own and eventually fly away and fly free, hopefully. But in terms of awakening within or kindling within the parent a spiritual transformation, I do think, children have that potency. And then we can see, what I'm trying to say is that if we as parents don't allow our children to transform us and usher us into a higher level consciousness, then we in our parenting, of course, will have influence, but we could have a devastating influence. We could have a negative influence. We could serve to deaden our children's spirits instead of enliven it. So, of course, it's a mutual interaction. And, of course, parenting is such a symbiosis between parent and child. We are both inextricably linked to each other. There's no denying that. But if we as parents allow our children to usher us into a higher consciousness, then we can truly be the spiritual teachers for our children. If we don't, and if we rest in ego, and if we remain buried under the powers of our own ego, then we will never be able to rise above and truly allow our children to rise to their potential. Then we'll just deaden or just be mired in a dysfunctional relationship with our children. So then we haven't really been their spiritual gurus. We've just been their materialistic or material gurus in the real world, practically speaking. So if we want to elevate this journey to a spiritual level, we need to allow our children, and our children are doing this all the time. We just need to be open and receptive to their power and influence to take us to a higher place of learning and living.
Okay, before I go on to the next question, I want to remind our audience that if they want to purchase your previous, now are your previous books on Namaste?
No, they're both on my website, www.globalid.com.
But the new
And through
book,
my website, you can go to Namaste Publishing or directly go to namastepublishing.com. It's a wonderful website, as Holly's talked about, with a wealth of other authors as well who talk about spiritual living and consciousness. So you can go to namastepublishing.com or globalid.com, and you can get both books on my website or pre-order the current book, The Conscious Parent, on the Namaste Publishing website.
well, I want to remind everyone that all of this information will be on my page on Holly Hall on sqr.fm. Just go to hosts and find Holly Hall, and you'll see all the information on there for Dr. Shefali and her books. I think what I would like to end this with about 10 minutes left. What is your story? What motivated you, inspired you? What happened that had you write about this, get into psychology and write about parenting and conscious parenting?
Well, I only really delved into this part of the psychology of humanity upon becoming a parent myself. I was just so struck at how much I had to transform in order to meet the needs of the being of my child that I just knew I had to write about it. And I was lucky that I had the tools in terms of psychological thinking to do so. And once I was able to find a way to integrate Eastern mindfulness into it, and I was just blessed to have had the tools to be able to think about this topic in this way, because I saw that this journey of parenting was truly an amalgam of both the psychological and the spiritual. I was just struck by my own spiritual transformation and inspired by how much more growing I still have to do on a daily basis, that I knew I had to reach out and share this with others and allow them to view the parenting journey in the same way, because it's just too precious to miss. The gifts are just too precious to miss and avoid. The parenting journey offers a plethora of spiritual opportunities, and I wanted to be able to highlight them for other parents as well.
Now, when you say tools, Dr. Shefali, do you mean the tools through your education as a psychologist, or tools of your Eastern philosophy and your own upbringing, or a blending of the two?
I think the blending of both, because as I said, I saw that this journey was both psychological and spiritual. And I was just lucky that I found a language that spoke to both. I had my Western psychological training that allowed me to have insights into the developmental needs of the child. And then I had the Eastern spiritual training, which allowed me to understand how the ego was in operation and how consciousness allows one to shift in one's dynamic with the other. So It really was a mix of both that allowed me to come up with this book. And when I proposed it to Namaste, they were so receptive, and they have just been able to help elevate this book to the level that I hope it's reached, and others will be able to, take something from it.
And I think they will. And I'm hoping, you can do as many talk radio show appearances as you can, because it needs to get out there. It's very important that parents or new parents, I think if you know someone who's pregnant or just had a child, give them this book. Especially if you're listening to SQR, which means you're already wanting to be enlightened. You already want to make a difference. And I think that's very important. It is. I don't think I'm afraid to say that it might be before your time. I think that some parents, especially in Western society, still need to get up to speed to how important it is to know more about themselves to be a better parent than it is to what kind of formula should I buy? What kind of clothes should I get? What's the perfect way to feed them? Should it be natural? Should it be organic? Do you know what I mean?
Right,
It,
right. And exactly, and when parents come to me in therapy wanting the latest, technique to fix their child or to discipline their children, I say the same thing, that all of that is secondary to the relationship, and the relationship can only be authentic when the parent is in touch with who it is they intrinsically are.
hmm
So
Now,
you're
I
absolutely
have another last question for you. It just came to me right now when you were talking that way. When a child turns 18, 19, and they
mhm,
leave the nest, they don't
mhm.
necessarily leave home, but they're definitely considered as independent, and the parent can no longer tell them where to go, what to do, and how to do it, right?
Right, right.
It is a big loss for the parent. I've witnessed it several times. They call it the empty nest syndrome, whatever it may be.
Mhm,
But I'm
mhm.
wondering, is it that the parent realizes that school is over for them too?
Oh, I don't know. I think I look at it as, oh shucks, I can't control my child anymore.
Shucks is a nice way of saying it.
No, I think the empty nest happens because the parent is finally just truly, has no choice but to be struck by the inevitable separation of spirits. But what I propose is that, you know, teenagehood and the empty nest is happening all the time,
Mhm,
as early as the twos and the threes and the fours, and there's shades of that kind of dynamic happening all the time if we parents truly allow our children to nurture their individuality and honor their own voice.
yeah.
Our children are, speaking up against us and testing us from the time they are 2 years old. So
Yeah.
the shades of defiance that we see in adolescence is happening from early childhood. And the separation of spirits that really strikes us when our children leave for university is happening all the time. It's just
Mhm.
that we have the illusion of, that connection and ownership because we have more control over our children. Our children are truly one with us, but as much as they are one, they are truly their own beings. And the earlier we parents can realize it, there is no empty nest syndrome at 18. The empty nest is all the time, technically, because there's no one in our nest. Our children are in their own nest, as they should be. And we are just fellow nesters traveling through life. And we have no ownership or possession over our children's spirits. And I think at 18, that just strikes us even more. So the illusion we were living under, that we had ownership or control or possession, is just now, it just crumbles. And there's a great
It
sense
hits
of loss
home.
then.
Yeah, yeah. And I think if we allow our children to evolve at the age of 19, I'm not looking forward to it. But my daughter's 11. Do you have
Right.
children, Dr. Shefali?
Oh, sure. I have a daughter. She's 7.5.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's
See,
and every age, I believe every age is a microcosm of every other age. So when
yeah.
people say, oh, my child just turned into a monster, or she just became this devil, or whatever they say when kids turn teenagers, I go, it cannot be. There is no sudden overnight change, though it may seem like that to the parent. What's really happened in those cases is that the child just finally discovers that it has a voice and can speak up against the parent. And we really don't want that sudden change to happen because it's
Mm-mm.
too much of a shock. We want to encourage some sort of, rebellion, if you will, or some sort of independence, assertion of will at every stage. So it doesn't come about as such a blatant shock at 13 or 15, whenever it does. We want to get used to negotiating with our children and helping them institute their will from a young age.
I agree. And you know what? You don't have to be really good with getting to know who you are to open up to your child and just say to them, I'm getting used to this. I allow you to have a voice. I may not like it right now, but I'm still allowing you to have a voice. Give me time to get used to it. I mean, I think children are open to realizing that we're not perfect either.
Right. We're not perfect, and this does not mean we need to be permissive.
No.
This doesn't mean, you're allowed to have a voice and manifest it any which way you will. No, you're allowed to have a voice, and I'm allowed to tell you how you're allowed to express it.
And we have to end the show right now. I thank you very much. And I really want you to be on as a guest again.
Absolutely, Holly. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
I'm sorry
you
for all the coughing. Thank you.
Bye. No problem. Bye now.